Hey Headbangers, this is Rustin with Metalholic and the Examiner. With us today, Keats Rickard and John Voegele of Swarm of Arrows from Philadelphia, the great new metal band out of the East. How the hell are you guys doing today?
Awesome, man.
Great, man. Thanks for having us.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad to have you, and I appreciate your patience with me. Little do the listeners know right now, but this is interview take 2 because some moron forgot to hit record the first time, so... You know, my love goes out to these guys for sticking with me in my brain dead moment. So much to talk about.
Both in there.
Swarm of Arrows. First off, great name. I'm going to have you give me the story on that. Want to talk about the debut album, The Great Seekers of Lesser Life. So give us a little backstory on the band, though, on how you guys came together, and then how you chose the name Swarm of Arrows, because it's a great name.
Part one, I guess. How the band came together was basically Greg and I played in another band before called Alarmcaster. It was a hardcore band. I was kind of itching to do something a little bit different, and around that time I had recently reconnected with John after, probably maybe 10 years or more. I hadn't seen him really. And, we had played actually John and I played in another band years back. And so we reconnected, and it just, I guess it was the perfect storm, if you will, and, or the perfect swarm. But yeah, we got together and started. I know. We started this project, and then we just brought Greg back on board. We, Alarmcaster kind of fell apart, and then Greg was looking for something else to do, and it was perfect timing. So that's how that happened.
Nice. And then, of course, we could probably take a guess, but I'll let you tell us the story behind the name Swarm of Arrows, because it's a great name. There's so many cheesy ones out there now, and it's hard to find a good one. And as you guys mentioned before, when we're young, that's the first thing we come up with is the name for the band. We start designing the logo before we ever write a lick of music.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah, John.
We're old, and I was doing that anyway, so... We spent so much time when we first got together. We were starting to work on music, and we're all anxious to get this going and have a name and know what to call it. And a lot of times when you're starting out, that's the funnest part. So we had a list a mile long of different possibilities, but we'd always run into there were 4 guys in the band, and somebody would come up with a name, and one of the other guys would like it, or 2 of the other guys would like it, but the other one was like, no, I don't like it. It sounds more like this, or I don't really like that one. And Swarm of Arrows was one Keats came up with that. It was really first. It was after we had really kind of established a little more kind of what direction we were going in and what we were going to sound like, and then so the name just fit the sound we were going for. And it was really the first name that, like, everybody, when we heard it, we were all like, hell yeah, that's the name of the band. Where before it had always been like somebody wasn't sure about it. Keats can tell you kind of the backstory of where it came from, but yeah, it was the first one we all just done, and we were like, yes, that's it. So,
backstory basically is I took the image from the movie Hero, the Jet Li movie, of him at the end being basically slain by this swarm of arrows at the end of the film. But as you mentioned before, Rustin, after having seen that and kind of pitching the idea to the rest of the band, I think it was John who also brought up the film 300 with the sky blacking out with arrows as well. So it just kind of compounded the liking, if you will, of the name itself, and kind of put it all at home. You know what I mean?
Well, in a sense, it's sort of an apt descriptor of the sound of the band anyway, so you chose wisely there, because, when you think of Swarm of Arrows, you think of the darkness blotting out the sky, and your music is very heavy, a lot of stoner and sludge elements to it. A lot of people, obviously, are going to throw comparisons out there to bands like Converge, Mastodon, Kylesa, stuff like that. Is that sort of what you guys were aiming for, or is that just sort of how, once you got in the room together, the vibe just sort of took you there?
Really, it's the latter. Really, the one thing that we agreed on from the beginning we knew we wanted it to be, heavy and, kind of, a metal band, but it really, the one thing we agreed to from the beginning was, let's not try to push it in any one direction. Let's not try to worry too much about, like, well, let's make it sound like this, or a lot of times you kind of start a band and it's like, hey, let's do something that'll be a combination of this band and this band meets this band, and we really just kind of wanted to be, let's get in a room, let's write some heavy stuff, and let's just see what happens, and that's what came out. But yeah, the bands you mentioned, and a lot of other bands, I think you can hear in what we play, because we've all been around forever. We, have, old school metal roots. We're a lot of us coming from punk and hardcore backgrounds and whatever. So you can hear all that stuff in there, but we're real careful not to worry about, let's do like a hardcore part here, or let's do this or that. We just kind of see what happens. And a lot of times after the fact, we're like, oh, hey, that kind of sounds like Converge there, or whatever. But we really just wanted to be as natural and organic, and just kind of let it happen. And as long as we dug it and it was something we would really want to listen to, then it was good. That's really kind of been the rule from the beginning, and we're keeping up with that. Obviously,
there's a very genuine ring to what you guys are doing, because you guys were able to tap Will Yip to produce the album, and that's high praise if he's supportive of what you're doing. How did that come about?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's basically how it happened. I mean, we had recorded an EP probably coming up on maybe close to 2 years ago. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, I think it'll be 2 years in March.
Yeah. So, but we had started writing, like, I think it'd come to like Christmas time or something, and we just decided, all right, well, let's just start writing. Let's see if we can come up with a full length worth of material. And basically, we just put our nose to the grinder and did that. And all the while we were doing that, we were, making demos of songs and so forth, and wondering, like, what are we going to do? Like, what's going to be the next step? Who's going to record this? We wanted it to sound good. And we had spoken to a couple of different people about it, but Will was kind of like, I don't know, he was sort of out of our reach in a way. Like, we were like, it was sort of like a pipe dream, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But we contacted him, and, he was like, okay, well, send me some demos. And we did, and he was real into it, like, called us, he called us back. He's like, I'm psyched on this. Let's do this, blah, blah, blah. So next thing you know, we're booking time, and then we're in the studio with Will Yip, and it was amazing. So.
And he's done some great stuff, so it's got I would assume that sort of really brings that, not that you weren't excited enough to begin with, but that's really got to bring your A game out.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean,
he's like he said, it was such a good dude. It was, it was what you hope for anytime you're going into the studio. It's like you just added another awesome member to your band, who totally knows what he's doing, totally gets what we're trying to do, and it was just, there was never, it was always, when we were recording, it was always all business, and you were real careful. He was real quick to point out, like, hey, you were a little slow on this or whatever, and we were all, everybody was awesome about, like, taking notes and whatever. But at the same time, like, when the record button wasn't pressed, like, we were just goofing around the whole time. He is such a ham, and it was just like a bunch of kids just having a goofy, stupid time. And it was awesome. So it was such a good experience while we were in there with him. Such a good dude.
Now, did his guidance and experience and stuff, did he help you guys flesh out any of the material once you got in there? He, hey, why don't you try doing this on this, or have you thought of this? Did you get any of that from him, or did he just pretty much give you just, the feedback that had to go with your playing and what to bring out of you musically?
Well, the cool thing about Will is that, like, I guess at this stage in time, like, some of the bands that he's more known for are maybe not necessarily our style.
Right.
But the cool thing about Will is that he knows, like, so much about music. You know what I mean? And yeah, definitely. I mean, we had figured out a lot of stuff. Like I said, we were demoing songs before we even went into the studio, and we had a lot of stuff figured out going in. So that helped. But once we got in there, like, he definitely put the icing on the cake. Like, he would definitely say, okay, maybe don't do that there, or maybe try this way. You know, so his expertise definitely played an integral part in what ended up happening with the record.
Right. You always look for that with a good producer. You always look for those moments where he comes up with something or she comes up with something that you were like, wow, I hadn't thought of that, but man, that really improves it.
Right. But at the same time, how do I put this? He was very, very caring in the fact that, like, he didn't overstep his bounds in that way. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, he gave us the freedom to realize what we wanted to do, and then he would just make subtle suggestions, or, you know what I mean? And it was just great. It was a great experience.
And the album title itself, The Great Seekers of Lesser Life, I absolutely love that, and we talked about it a little bit before, but you tell me your backstory on the title.
There's a lot of different meanings, as there are, you know, with pretty much all the lyrics on the record. The record itself started loosely as a concept, but it's not a concept record. But it's basically an encompassing view of, you know, society as a whole, like feeding off of the negativity of itself,
right.
And just continuing on that path, like, you know, in a consumer type way, especially here in the United States.
Right. Well, and you were talking about the word you used was maladies, you know, and you see that with shows that are like Intervention and Hoarders and stuff like that, where people just are drawn to the negative side and the aspects of human life and our frailties and such. But as I told you when I first heard the album name, the first thing I thought of was our nature as human beings, and especially as Americans, you know, to worship people like the Kardashians, the Hiltons, the Lindsay Lohans, you know, the Honey Boo Boos and all this. It's like, I mean, we've got television shows galore about the stupidity in America, and people are glorifying this in our country, and it's not surprising that we're in the shape that we're in, or that the global view of us as Americans has become so tarnished. When you see that's what we worship instead of our prouder moments and our intellect and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, it's kind of on both sides. Like, we as humans, we're on both sides of it. You know, like, you know, we are the seekers of that. We seek that kind of stuff out. But at the same time, sometimes we are the lesser life. You know, like, if you look at it from, like, you know, some of these giant corporations who just are out there, you know, seeking out people, you know, to exploit them, you know, and take them for whatever they're worth, and, you know, and not caring about the human element of any of that. It's more about just exploitation. So.
True. You know, and it's funny, it's like every time I go into Walmart, everybody's got their favorite Walmart stories, but what's scary as a microcosm, the people of Walmart really have become the majority in this country rather than the minority.
Absolutely.
And that's what's really scary, you know. So when people talk about the end of the world coming in a few weeks here, that's really the way I see it. It's not that an asteroid's going to hit the Earth and we're going to blow up. It's going to be, you know, the people we put in political office voted for by the people who are basically too dumb to know how to even dress in polite society. So.
Yeah, it's going to be one big implosion.
Exactly. So, but the entire album, Great Seekers of Lesser Life, is just full of great songs, and I want to talk about a few of them. The first one being Alive Like Death. What's the backstory on that song?
It's kind of much like the title of the record. You know, it's basically, it's at face value, it's a lot, you know, it's about being alive like death. You know, a lot of people are just moving around like cattle and not thinking about anything. I don't want to say that everybody does that, but there's a great majority of people that have decided that it's okay to not have to make the decisions anymore, to not have to think about the things that they do. They're so used to being force-fed, and it becomes like a zombie-like mentality, and that's basically where the title came from.
Well, and it's funny because we talk in this country, you know, glorifyingly, if you will, about the zombie apocalypse. It's like the hip trend now, but really, we have become, a vast majority of Americans, sadly enough, we have become the zombie apocalypse. And that was the first thing I thought when I saw Alive Like Death. I'm like, how poetic, you know?
Well, thanks. Yeah, that's basically what it's about.
So now I got to ask you guys, of course, new band and everything. We've got to learn some more about you. So if you could, each of you take a minute and basically give us, you know, a little history on your own influences and how you came to music. If you had that moment of epiphany where you were like, "That's what I want to do."
As far as music, I mean, for me, Dio, Holy Diver. That's where it all started for me. As far as like listening to heavy music, I was in junior high and more years ago than I care to admit. And a buddy of mine was like, "Here, check this out." And until then, I just kind of, you know, just been a normal person who just kind of listened to whatever was on the radio and didn't really care or pay much attention to it. But like that Dio just kind of grabbed me and just kind of. It's the power and like the groove and the songwriting, like that album just totally grabbed me. And from then on, I was a metalhead, and then got into Iron Maiden and Metallica and Slayer and all the big ones. And then kind of in high school, later in high school, really, I was kind of a metalhead all through high school, and later on started to get into old punk and hardcore and Misfits and Gorilla Biscuits, and I actually grew up on Long Island, so it was real close to New York. So I used to go and see Sick of It All play, and all the East Coast hardcore bands. And then my first actual band I was in was a band from Long Island called the Warped Weeble Wobbles. That was my band in high school, and we were kind of like a comedic kind of punk band. And it was so much fun. We wrote like the most ridiculous songs, but like we kind of we tried to like take it seriously, write like really good but silly songs, and just had a ball with doing that. And then I eventually moved to Pennsylvania when I went away to college up in the Scranton, Wilkes-Barre area, and ended up in a band there called Option. In like the early to mid 90s, playing hardcore, and that was Keats is from up that way, so that's where he and I first knew each other. We each played in different bands, and we knew each other from going to shows, and we actually played in a band together in 1997, I think.
Oh man, why'd you have to date us, dude?
Sorry, we were 4 years old at the time.
Yeah.
But so yeah, we played in the band a lot of years ago, and then really kind of lost touch for years, and then we just reconnected actually because an old buddy of ours who played in another band that we were good friends with did this retrospective on the hardcore scene in Northeast Pennsylvania, and really brought together a lot of people who hadn't seen each other for years, and it was such a strong and awesome scene up there. So it was great to get back together in general with people. And when Keats and I reconnected and realized we were actually living really close to each other again, we were like, dude, we should be making music again. So, that's kind of where the band started. And then as far as my influences, I mentioned some bands before, but, a lot of Iron Maiden, a lot of things like Gorilla Biscuits. My favorite band of all time is Into Another, who's I got to catch in New York at the Revelation 25-year anniversary shows, and they're coming to Philadelphia in a couple weeks, so I'm stoked to see them again. I tend towards heavy music, but I'll listen to anything as long as it's good and kind of makes me feel something,
Right.
So I'll take it where I can get it as long as it's good.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of times Iron Maiden, and so influence-wise, in terms of forming your bass playing background, if you will, obviously I would assume Steve Harris was one of them, but who else as bass player really sort of helped you form your own style?
Yeah, I guess again, Into Another is my favorite band of all time, and Tony Bono, who died a few years ago, unfortunately, is really my favorite bassist of all time. If you're not familiar with them, totally check them out. They're unbelievable. Cliff Burton, obviously, it's amazing. Just the aggression and the way he just kind of drove everything home. Guys like Billy Gould from Faith No More.
Right.
Love that dude. Who else? The Geezer Butler. Who else would I put on that list? Actually have a list somewhere because I'm kind of a geek about my gear and my influences. But
that was the great thing from when we were younger, without dating ourselves too much more. But back in that day, before you had the internet and all that, we used to do that. We used to make the lists of the best bass players, not just of all time, but every year. This year, this so and so was the best bass player.
Yep.
And, all those magazines like Cream and Circus and Kerrang and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We keep the lists in our Trapper Keepers. It was awesome.
So, what about you, Keats? As a vocalist, a guitar player, a songwriter, who influenced you in your various styles and musically? What was that moment for you where you were like, hey, this is what I want to do?
Oh, gosh. I mean, really came down to, in the beginning, it came down to my dad. My dad was like a self-taught piano player, and, as a kid, I would sit there and listen to him. He just would play stuff, but he never really played out or did anything like that. He would just play at the house, and he had tons of albums. It was mostly like Zeppelin and, Cream,
right.
Things like that. Even some Jethro Tull, stuff like that. That was kind of my early introduction to music as a whole. And then I think I was about 5 or 6, and there were some older kids that lived down the street from me. Now, I think it was maybe like 7, but they were like teenagers at the time, and they were starting a band, and they were all into Black Sabbath. So I used to go over to their place and listen to them play and make all types of noise, and it just struck a chord in me from a very early age. And musically, I'm all over the place. I love, the thing that has stuck with me since the beginning was music that had some sort of intensity and a reality to it, and music that took me somewhere when I listened to it. And generally, a lot of stuff that you hear on the radio or in the pop realm just really never did that for me. It was mostly the stuff, like a lot of heavy bands, like really did that for me. Or storytelling, like I love Tom Waits.
Right.
And I love good lyrics. There's so many stuff. I mean, I could probably list stuff for days upon days. And I played in a lot of different style bands, but mostly it's been it's been cut from the heavy end of things.
Right.
And, that's what I've always been drawn to, whether it be metal or punk or hardcore or sludge or thrash or whatever subgenre you want to put on it. I love it all. You know what I mean? So I'm just into making good, intense music,
So when you started singing, was there a vocalist or 3 that you looked to in terms of how your voice was, that you would sort of like to tap into that signature that they had, or?
Well, actually, yeah, it's kind of funny, and I didn't realize this now until somebody else brought it up recently, but and I spoke to John about this. When I first started playing music, I was playing in a hardcore band, and one of my favorite bands at the time was Judge, a band called Judge from New York City, and I tried so hard to sound like Mike Judge. Like, for some reason, like, he had this deep growl that really resonated with me, and like I was like, man, I want to sound, if I can sound like Mike Judge, like, that was it. And it's funny because recently somebody had heard some of the stuff that we were doing, and they were like, oh man, you kind of sound like Mike Judge. I was like, really? That's crazy. But then I remembered that, like, when I first started, like, trying to do vocals, he was a guy that I tried to emulate. But I mean, other than that, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't really try to emulate anybody. I love so many vocalists. I love, like, John spoke of Into Another, like, Richie, the singer of that band, has an amazing voice. I love the Mastodons and, those type bands, like Matt Pike. Like, that guy's voice is, like, I thought thought Mike Judge's voice back in the day was like thick and intense, but like Matt Pike's voice, like it takes it to such another level.
Well, and I got a lot of the High on Fire vibe out of the album too. So.
Oh, cool! That's awesome. Thank you so much.
But well, and again, the whole album is just phenomenal. Getting back to what we're here for anyway. Now you guys are on Dullest Records. I'd never even heard of them before. How did you connect with them?
They're a local label here. We actually just once we started playing out, Danny, one of the two guys, along with another guy named Lewis, who run Dullest. Danny plays in a band called Holland Alarm, and we played one of our, I think it was our second show we played with them, and just right off the bat, connected with those guys. They're just a good bunch of dudes playing good music. And we all just got along real well. And it wasn't until a while later that we realized that that Danny and Lewis had put together a label, and they'll be the first ones to tell you, like, they know they're never going to be the biggest label in the world, and they don't want to be. I honestly believe these guys when they say, like, all they care about is just hooking up with good bands and helping those bands to get good music out there for people to hear. And they really, just as like the contract we signed with them is like ridiculous. It's really just like a list of all the things that they won't do to screw us and ways that they can help us. Like, that's really, where so many times with any kind of contract, whatever it is, music or otherwise, it's like you got to look in there for all the fine print and find out, how you're going to end up getting screwed in the end. And like, there's nothing in our contract that like any of us were worried about at all, because it was totally like just looking out for us and making sure that everything that they do, it helps us to move our music forward and get it out for people to hear. And they've been cool as hell, super helpful, really good dudes. Really enjoy working with them.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than signing a contract with a record label and you go home, babe, good news and bad news. Good news is I got signed today. Bad news is apparently in the fine print we've got to give up the second car, and you might as well sell the child's seat in the back because apparently I gave our daughter away too and didn't realize it. So.
Yeah.
And you guys have already gotten a great deal of attention for your album. I mean, Noise Creep loves you guys. So, I mean, if you've got somebody that big already, touting how wonderful you are, it means you're making a mark with people who notice and recognize these things. So there's great things to come for you guys. Now, I've stolen you guys for way too long now, in part because of my earlier mental instability. And I'm kicking myself now because we lost our entire Honey Boo Boo conversation. But
oh, I know, man. Oh well.
We could recreate it,
but
yeah, we could save that for another time too.
There you go. But I did tell Keats that there were a couple of questions I was going to ask just for fun to sort of round things out, give you guys a little time to think about it. But it's almost the end of the year. Do you guys have a favorite album that you've been listening to this year that's really sort of stuck with you that you might consider the best album of 2012?
There's been a lot of great albums this year, like tons. I mean, as far as a heavy metal album goes, I mean, I love the new Baroness album, the double album. It's not a heavy metal record. People took tons of shots of this record, but if people took the time to appreciate good music, and really dug into it, it's a phenomenal piece of art. So there's that. But from a heavy perspective, I mean, I love the new Neurosis record. But best of the year, I think it's going to be a toss-up between High on Fire and the new Converge record. Both just came out slugging and with amazing riffs and songwriting and just pummeling records.
Absolutely, great choices too. And getting back to the Baroness album, I love that album. And yes, after the previous couple of albums, the Red album, the Blue album, people were sort of expecting that continued heaviness on this one, and they really sort of went in a different direction. But And that's why I said earlier, I hate labels, because if it's good, it's good. There's still plenty of heaviness there. It's a good rock album. It's a good hard rock album, but there's a whole lot of other influences on there. And I think anybody who listens to any genre of music and says that that's the only genre of music that exists or matters is being disingenuous, because our musical integrity is formed by so many different things, as you talked about before. You know, we talk about Led Zeppelin as one of the early heavy metal bands, and they were barely more than a blues and rock band, you know?
Right, exactly. Yep.
But, yeah, it's a phenomenal album. I love both contingents of it, the green and the yellow. So, great choice there. What about you, John?
Yeah, Keith stole some of my answers, but it's cool. Probably the new, for me, for 2012, would be between the new High on Fire and the new Converge. And we just saw Converge a couple weeks ago, and we get to see High on Fire this week, so we're both pretty stoked about that. I mean, the new High on Fire is honestly one of like the biggest, thickest, heaviest records I've ever heard. Just the sound that they got on that with Kurt Ballou is just unbelievable. And it's an album that, it was just last night actually. On the way back from the show, we were listening to that, and I was saying how, like, for some reason, that album, when I first listened to it, I find the things that I end up loving the most are usually the things I don't really dig when I first heard them. Mm-hmm. And that record, when I first got it, I was kind of like, I don't know. It sounds awesome. It's huge. It sounds big, but it's just not grabbing me. And fortunately, I still listened to it a few times and like started to grab. Something started to hook me in, and the more I listen to it, I can't stop listening to it. It's just awesome now. And the new Converge is just sick. They got such a good sound on that record, and they totally Converge in general as a band, and I'd say the same thing about Mastodon, and Keats has heard me talk about this a million times. So they're just, again, with both of those bands, I didn't really like them at first when I first listened to them, but once I gave them a chance, I was holy cow! I could not. They just once they grab you, they just don't let go, man. And Converge really seems like they kind of perfected what they do on this newest record. It's like it's really everything you love about Converge, only better. Really dig it.
Right. And what he was trying to say in radio speak was "holy shit" or perhaps "holy fuck," but he was afraid to use such extraordinary language on where kiddies might be listening, but they don't. Not on Metalholic Radio anyway. So, and I noticed nobody wants to try and say the name of the new High on Fire album, De Vermis Mysteris, because they're afraid they're going to mess it up. But I just call it Mystery of the Worm. So. Which is ultimately what it means. So, and then the other question, and I don't know, John, if Keats gave it to you, but I wanted to give you time to think about it. It being the holidays, we were talking about this the other day when we were bored at work, and it was like one of those party of five questions. If you could have any 5 people sit down for a holiday dinner with you and just bullshit and talk about whatever, past, present, alive, or dead, what 5 people would you pick?
Oh, God, wow. All right, I'll do this as fast as I can so I don't think about it too much. Ben Franklin, Jimi Hendrix, and I think they'd get along real well. And Bruce Dickinson. Yeah, Bruce Dickinson and Steve Harris. I think that'd be fun. And I don't want to do another musician. Maybe, how about Maxfield Parrish, who's an old illustrator that the art fag and me want to chat with that guy. He's been one of my favorites forever since high school. My high school art teacher introduced me to him. Maxfield Parrish, check him out.
Nice. That's a good list. Ben Franklin is at the top of every one of my lists. So, I'm
for sure.
Glad to hear you say that one. So, what about you, Keats?
That's awesome. Ben Franklin is one that I didn't think of, but I would think of that, or I would like that now in hindsight. But anyway, I did think about it a little bit, and my list was Rasputin, Matt Pike, who we spoke about just recently, and Lemmy. I'm sure Lemmy and Matt Pike would have their own little thing going on. Jeff Meldrum. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but he's I'm a Bigfoot guy, and he's kind of one of the leading researchers of Bigfoot. out there right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be him and Tom Waits, who I think in of all time, if I can meet anybody ever, like, I'm not like a celebrity freak type guy, but like I think if I met Tom Waits, I might pass out.
Did you see him in that new film that just came out?
No, but I heard about it and I got to see it. I still have to see it. Yeah, I heard he was great.
Yeah, it was a great film. It was really funny and everything. My list included, like I said, Ben Franklin, and I think I threw in like Dennis Leary, maybe George Carlin. You either got to have like George Carlin or Dennis Miller, somebody like that. Tina Fey, because she's both beautiful and hilarious. But
oh man, yeah, you came from the like. Oh, I should have thought of like somebody else to kind of keep the life of the party going. Like, yeah, you picked some good ones on that end.
Well, yeah, there's so many. I couldn't even just stop at 5. Just for the train wreck, thing. Yeah, maybe Lindsay Lohan, or maybe have Marilyn Monroe there, because I've always wanted to ask: did you commit suicide, or were you murdered by JFK's people? Stuff like that. But on every list I've ever had, Ben Franklin's there, because he was really the rock star of his time.
Totally, yeah.
Guys, thanks so much for taking the time, and we will have to do this again, and I'll make sure that next time we don't lose some of the funnest stuff by not having the recorder turned on. And again, the new album, The Great Seekers of Lesser Life, on Dullest Records, Swarm of Arrows, Keats Rickard, John Voegele, and of course the other guys in the band, Greg Frazenda and Tim Lynham. Great album. You got to get your hands and ears on it. You can check out the review on metalholic.com, and you can listen to them here on Metalholic Radio. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.